Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today to chat about meta ads. And Marcus, thanks for joining us as well.
Glad to be here.
So we had a podcast earlier this year. And for those of you who haven't listened to the podcast, we're going to try and not double up too much on the content. So if you enjoy what you hear, go back and listen to that one for some topics that we're probably not going to cover, at least not as in-depth today. That was more an overview, and we're going to get into the weeds a little bit. But as we get started, so most of you probably know, I'm David Barnard. I work for Revenue Cat. We're a platform with a mission to help developers make more money. So we build an SDK that goes in the app to handle monetization, paywalls, A/B testing. Like there's a ton of stuff in the platform, and we're actually working on a lot of other really cool stuff that we're adding to it. And Marcus, why don't you give a quick intro of who you are?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Marcus. I work as an independent consultant, mainly focused on meta ads for subscription apps, and tend to work with like smaller app developers that are seeing like first traction on the platform and want to scale and become really big in the end. And I'm also creating content around that on LinkedIn. So if you're not following me yet, make sure to check out my profile. I share a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about here also on LinkedIn.
Cool. And a couple other things to talk about. I also do a podcast, as I mentioned, with Marcus was on earlier this year. It's called the Subclub Podcast. So go check out subclub.com. A lot of the kind of stuff we talk about in the webinars, we cover, on a twice a month basis on the podcast. A lot of really cool guests coming up that I'm excited about. New podcast dropping tomorrow with Christian Selig, the founder of Apollo. And that was a really fun conversation. So don't miss that one. Today, we're going to try and go fairly quick. I know a lot of you are going to have questions for Marcus. So we're going to try and leave extra time for Q&A today. If you do have questions for Marcus, we're not going to answer the questions live. We're going to kind of go through the content that we prepared for today and then do a Q&A at the end. So put your questions in the Q&A and then upvote ones that you want answered. And then actually, if you would, downvote ones that were already answered. So sometimes we end up with questions that early in the webinar, early in the conversation that end up getting answered later in the conversation. So downvote the ones that you feel like were adequately answered in the conversation. That way I can kind of prioritize by the upvotes. And last thing, we are going to share this on YouTube, and if you're registered here, it will be emailed to you as soon as it's available for replay. And then the very last thing, we are 1 week out from me and Marcus meeting in person for the very first time.
Yeah.
So Revenue Cat is hosting our first annual App Growth Annual. And Marcus is going to be there leading a workshop. The workshops, unfortunately, will not be streamed. So we'll have to get Marcus back on maybe early next year to make sure we've covered all the content that people were excited about in the workshop.
It's going to be even more advanced meta ad strategies then.
Yes, even more advanced, super deep advanced. But if you haven't already registered, go register because there will be 6 talks live streamed. And that's appgrowthannual.com. And I think we have like a few more in-person spots, not many though. So if you are in the San Francisco area or can book a flight real quick, you can still apply to attend in person. But probably at this point, best to just register for the online seminar, the online version. All right, that was a long intro. Let's dive into meta. So the first thing I wanted to get into is how you think about campaign architecture and attribution when you're just getting started with meta ads. And then maybe since this is the more advanced, we can then start diving into how you then kind of design for scaling.
Yeah. So I mean, anyone familiar with the channel probably heard that you want to consolidate your account because in the end, Meta works on the conversion signal that you send them. So the more signal it receives, the better it's going to be at targeting the right audience for you and to doing that in a efficient manner and doing it on a daily basis just as good. So when structuring your account, you always want to think about like, what does that mean in terms of the signal volume I can still receive on each ad set, and what are then the restrictions I want to put on the algorithm? Where do I want to handhold it so that I can in the end have control over where my money goes? Because whoever ran campaigns before probably has seen that Meta tends to call shots quite quickly. On if you put everything in one campaign, they will decide quickly which ad is the best one and then allocate most of your budget towards it. So if you have very few campaigns and very few ad sets, then in the end, your money is going to be very consolidated, usually on one creative that runs towards a certain audience. And that's not always the best thing to do. So when I start an account, then usually, depending on my budget, I would start out with just one campaign that I'm going to optimize towards usually an app event, which is probably something we are going to talk about later. And within that, I'm going to start with ad sets based on that I usually targeted broad in the beginning, because targeting is handled quite well by the algorithm these days. So I'm not using any interests. I do use lookalikes once I scale, but often to new advertisers, they're not available because you need a ton of data to create them. So I start broad, but I do, depending on the creatives that I have, split out my ad sets by creative type. And the idea behind this is that I've seen over and over that in the end, different creatives will scale on different placements. If I use a static ad 4 to 5, that's mainly scaling on an Instagram feed or a Facebook feed, because that's just the place where this more static content sits. While if I run a 9 to 16 short form video UGC style, basically a creator talking to the camera, that's a native format or native creative type to reels or stories. So that's more likely to scale in these places. And in the beginning, I'm really trying to figure out like what's the cost per action I can drive from these different placements. And then also cross-check that with my first-party data to understand which audience is behind which of these placements and what am I expecting in terms of conversion rates, because it's a lot different if you're buying traffic that is potentially a bit older from a Facebook feed compared to if you're buying traffic that is relatively young, lower intent, not as with lower purchase power from an Instagram Reels that is just a placement used by younger audiences. So that's usually the first split that I kind of try to explore. And as I scale, creative type is definitely always leading my decisions there. So as I find new creative themes, for example, or I try different creative types like carousel ads, I would usually put them in a different ad set, try to figure out if that's running profitably, and therefore add more ad sets over time.
Yeah. One of the things that gets asked a lot, and I wanted to re-ask this question, is what do you see as the minimum budget for a specific campaign? So you talked about kind of splitting out the campaigns, and I want to dive into those budgets because it's something like people ask all the time, but it seems like things are changing. Before we answer, though, I did forget to talk about the poll. So we did have a poll. I meant to ask folks to fill that out when we first started, but I do want to pause and just look at the poll real quick. So the highest percentage of folks on this call have little experience, but still learning on meta ads. So it sounds like most people have actually done some meta ads. 27% are new to meta ads. And then we actually have some very experienced folks on here. That makes up, 34% are quite comfortable and or very experienced with meta ads. So kind of a good audience for this digging deeper. But let's take it back up just one level and answer this question, because I think this applies even to the more advanced strategies. It's like in 2024, you're kicking off, you set up a new campaign. How should you be thinking about budget in order to get the signals you need to train the algorithm today?
Yeah. So I usually quote around 10K for the pure like media budget for that, because in the end, yeah, you need sufficient signal for the platform. Also in the beginning, everything is a test, of course. You're testing your creative, you're testing what your architecture looks like, you're testing your conversion event. And of course, you want to make sure that you're placing a few strategic bets to figure out what's the best setup for me, and is there a way at this point where I can run at a return on ad spend that already looks interesting. And that just needs a bit of volume so that you send Meta enough signals on all of these tests to figure out, like, can that happen? And on top of that comes creative production, which is, I'm just seeing the question. I'm going to answer it now. It's 10K a month. But basically, I would say, I mean, like, I think after 10K, you can make a good decision on, is this going to go somewhere if you are following the best practices and you know what you're doing. So it's not necessarily 10K a month. After the 10K, if you see, okay, like, I'm far off in terms of return, I've optimized this for the right event, I've had a creative that I feel strongly about, that has been user research before, then if you're at kind of, I don't know, like negative 80% return, probably there is work to be done in your product, in your funnel, on pricing before you can turn this into a profitable channel for you. So then it wouldn't have to be 10K per month, but 10K once, and then figure out what's the next steps.
Yeah. And would that be per campaign? So as you spin up new campaigns, you would need to kind of think about each new campaign structure, having that kind of minimum investment as you like start experimenting and scaling?
Not necessarily, no, not per campaign. I mean, in the end, what matters is the amount of conversion events you can drive for that cost. So if you're optimizing for a trial start, for example, you might be getting these at as low as like $10 in the US. If you're doing well and your pricing isn't too high. And then from that, basically, you like, the recommendation is to drive 50 events per week so the algorithm can do a good job, and that would already allow you to do multiple ad sets you can test. So the 10K rather includes also that you might want to try maybe 2 different conversion events in that test, and then you have a few different creatives, of course, that also need to gather signals on them to find their audience. So in the end, it will look different for every advertiser what you're trying to test in the beginning. But 10K, I think, is a good ballpark where you can give the channel a fair chance, which is, of course, a lot more expensive than an Apple search ads, for example, where you can kind of build on your 3 most interesting keywords, and even for a few $100, you can already see first results of whether that's going to work. And on top comes media production. So depending on the type of your app, there is going to be different styles of creatives that are relevant to it. And they can be more expensive or they can be more cheap. Like UGC is definitely a style that's working for most apps, but to produce that, you need a creator that you need to pay out. Then you need a video editor, or the creator can do that himself. You need scripting for these ads based on user research. So either you're good at all these things, or you might want to hire people that are good at them, which of course means a little bit of overhead. And then a creative could come at the cost of maybe $400, $500, and you definitely just want to test more than just one.
Yeah. How do you think about that trade-off between signal quality and signal quantity? Because you can just throw money at it and get more quantity of signal, but how do you optimize for signal quality over just kind of like raw quantity of events?
Yeah. One of the big questions there is usually like, should I choose an event that's more upper funnel so I can collect more of them? Because Meta gives this recommendation of 50 events a week, and then everyone thinks, okay, it seems I can't reach 50 trials a week yet, for example, because my conversion isn't strong enough, or I'm in a very competitive space. And then I'm just going to move to install, which I can get a lot of because they're only $3-4 or something. But like, usually I would say you want to, like, I mean, the way this is going to work is you're training an algorithm, and you're training it to do a good job for you. And therefore, you want to, of course, feed it with data that has relevance for you. So if you're feeding it with a lot of install data, it's going to get better at training, at finding installs. But an install can be of a very different quality. Some installs are going to be worth $50 for you. Some are going to be worth 50 cents for you. So basically, the modeling that needs to happen based on that, and the qualification that you need to do, is still going to be a whole lot of work, and that's going to be hard. So therefore, I try to usually move as deep in the funnel as possible so that Meta actually learns about what's my business goal in the end. In a perfect world, I would feed Meta my return on ad spend, and they would know my renewal rates. They would know which SKUs people are buying, and then they could do a perfect job.
Right.
That's not where we're at. So a trial is usually a good place to start. But even there, over time, I would reconsider if a trial is the right thing for you to optimize for, because many people start a trial, but then often the trial conversion differs massively by age, gender, user goal. So if you're seeing that, for example, the usual case is broad targeting, optimizing for a trial. The algorithm buys a lot of young traffic because it's relatively cheap. They are happy to start a trial, but they're also very happy to cancel it quickly. So if you're seeing these patterns, then really think about how can I counteract these kind of quirks that I see in the algorithm, where it's Meta is blind and I need to kind of inform the algorithm where to go. So one way could be I exclude younger age groups from targeting. I could try to only fire my trial start event for people that are older. If they've given me that information onboarding, I could say anyone below 25, I just don't fire the event. Hence, the algorithm learns who are the people that are still starting a trial. Or I could think about building event combinations where I say I'm only going to fire the trial if people have started it and then did, for example, a meaningful action in my app where I know it's going to increase the likelihood of them converting. So I think the conversion event is in the end something that you want to think about deeply, and it can definitely alter over time and be upgraded. And you definitely shouldn't set and forget and think, I'm just going to do trial. I'm going to send it to the standard trial start event and I'm good forever, because in the end, what the data that Meta sees and how much of it sees is going to make a massive difference in terms of your campaign performance.
Yeah, one of the patterns I see a lot, and actually, I just had an update to my app yesterday that drove quite a bit of traffic, and so I was looking through some of those transactions in the revenue cat dashboard, and it got press on Mac rumors, and that's what drove a lot of the traffic yesterday. That is exactly what you said, kind of a younger audience, probably more tech savvy, more kind of terminally online. And we don't yet, this is something actually my colleagues are working on, showing when people turn off auto renew. So currently I was just kind of random sampling, going through some transactions, and over, I think of the first 10 I sampled, 6 of them, I saw the exact same pattern: open the app, and then within 60 seconds to 2 minutes, start a free trial. And then within 60 seconds to 2 minutes, turn off auto renew. And it's 6 of 10 turned off auto renew within those 2 minutes. But a lot of them would turn off auto renew and then still come back to the app to kind of finish setting it up or whatever. Is that so would you suggest if I were to start scaling up, not fire that trial start event until I know they haven't turned off auto renew? So and how would you set that up within the app? You would detect that the auto renew had been turned off, and then exclude that from triggering the event?
Yeah, that has been a pretty common tactic prior to ATT. So yeah, for example, at Blinkist, I think we waited for 4 hours before we then said anyone who's still active on their auto renew within their trial, that's whom we fire the event for, and then hence Meta gets higher quality signal. But yeah, I mean, I haven't seen this, or at least at Blinkist, we didn't see that this was a massive upgrade in terms of ad performance just from sending that event. But what, of course, it helped a lot for is finding the better creative based on these signals. Because
Right.
if we see a cost per trial on a creative and it still includes that cohort that is definitely going to cancel, then we're going to be evaluating based on that cost per trial. While if we evaluate based on a qualified cost per trial, as you call it, then of course there might be creatives which are driving lower quality traffic and others are driving higher quality traffic, and you get a better read on that. So that's what I feel like it's a bit more useful for. The tactic was a bit forgotten, or like it wasn't as prominent when Scan was the main attribution framework for most accounts, because in the end, your conversion event on Scan needs to be triggered when the person is in the app. And basically this could be that they don't necessarily are, they're not necessarily in the app after 4 hours. So that therefore it was a bit tricky to like make sure that you're sending the right data back. Now that AEM is what I think most accounts are running on, I would say it's something that's worth a try again, especially for that kind of creative evaluation piece. I wouldn't expect kind of performance to skyrocket just because you're switching from a trial start to this. What I think makes a lot of difference though, and I've been recently seeing that a lot, is also the standard event that you send this to. So Meta is bucketing your events into certain standard events that they define, because they want to make sure that they can collect data from all advertisers and in categories so that they can pre-train their models. So if you're sending your data to the start trial standard event and optimize for that, that's going to result in a different audience targeting performance compared to if you send it to a purchase or to a subscribe. So definitely it's worth to also play around with that. There recently was like a bug or maybe update, it's a bit hard to say, from Meta, where they switched off their auto logging or they switched the auto logging of events from so any direct subscription without a trial would now go to subscribe, and it was a purchase before, and any auto logged trial subscription would now go to start trial, and it was a purchase before. Of course, they didn't tell anyone before, so when the switch happened, any campaign optimizing for the other event would just not get any conversion signal anymore. But for one of my accounts, actually, it was a super interesting test, because we then had to switch to the other event, which was from start trial to subscribe. And first indications look like that subscribe is actually delivering quite a bit better performance than start trial did. And that's really just from the event that we're optimizing for. Other than that, nothing has changed.
Yeah. The ultimate quality signal is subscribe. But have you seen any success with waiting on and only sending the subscribe, like with a 3-day trial, or is that pretty much just not an option these days to wait the full 3 days before giving the algorithm feedback?
Yeah, I mean, most of the apps I work with have a 7-day free trial, but usually I wouldn't recommend to go for an event that's deeper within the funnel than a day. I mean, with Scan, it's not even possible, but in the end, Meta needs like quicker signal. Otherwise, for 3 days or 4 days, even, they're going to be flying blind, and only then they start receiving who's converting. So like, try to find something that happens early in the app, and if it's not there, then try to design your app in a way that you create that event. I mean, an interesting tactic is also using a paid trial, which in the end is much higher intent than if someone starts a free trial. So you can leverage introductory offers for that and basically make it so that the first 7 days are already $3 or something, and then it renews into a $60-70 yearly, as you would usually do. And that way you're building in this initial hurdle so that all these people that are going to cancel right away are just not going to do it because it's not worth $3 to them. And through that, you've created an event that's of higher quality than just the free trial. So I think it's also a product task in the end. It's not just you or like your marketing team choosing, okay, these are the events available, which ones do we pick, but really be intentional about how can we create an event that has, in the end, a high correlation with turning into a high quality user for us.
Yeah, that's such great advice. I did want to move on. We're 25 minutes in. I said we were going to save a lot of time for Q&A, but we're only like 2 points into our notes. You're just such a wealth of knowledge, Marcus. We're going to have to like do a 6-hour webinar. I mean, that's what the workshop is for, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll have to split this into like a 5-part webinar series. Let us know in the chat if you want to hear more from Marcus, and if this format is a good way to kind of absorb some of what he's learning. So the next thing was that you talked about creating different campaigns to test different things, but then sometimes you do want to consolidate that. What is good about consolidation, and then what can go wrong in consolidating some of these winning creatives or winning campaigns yeah, what's good
Yeah.
and bad about consolidation?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of people out there that are like a bit too heavy on consolidation, I think. So, I mean, Meta pushes for it and it tells you more signal is better on each campaign. But in the end, if your conversion event is, for example, a start trial and Meta doesn't know who converts into a paying subscriber and into someone that renews, then again, there is modeling and decision making to be done on your end based on the data you see in your product. And that's where you then want to start pulling in different campaign splits to inform that. So for example, if you see, as we said in the beginning already, if you see older people converting better than younger people, which is the case in most of their apps because they just have more money, then you want to pull in that campaign split for creatives that run on Facebook, creatives that run on Instagram and Reels. And they are most likely going to be driving younger and older people. And then you could have different cost per trial goals on them because you know people that are older are going to convert 30% higher than someone that is in that younger age group. And that can happen for a lot of different things. It might happen on a gender basis. It might happen on different user goals. So as you grow, you might have different creative teams talking to, like, maybe one is more for lifestyle, the other is more for career goals, and then often anything that is career related is going to convert better because people are connecting it to like a monetary value. So that's where you really want to figure out, based on the data you have first party in your product, what do I know that Meta doesn't, so that I pull in campaign splits to then force budget onto these different segments in different ways.
How reliable or how much signal are you able to meaningful signal are you able to get from App Store Connect? So like if I go into App Store Connect, they give me demographic information. And again, for my app specifically, a weather app, most of my subscribers skew male and skew older. And they have the little charts and stuff like that. Do you look at those things when, like, especially early on, like defining some of these campaign structures? Like if you were setting up for my app and you saw that in App Store Connect, would you use that to then kind of inform the campaign structure and how you do that early targeting? Or do you feel like that's like not high enough signal and you really should be like asking those kind of demographic questions if relevant? Like maybe my weather app asking somebody's age is like, why the hell are you? And like people aren't going to answer
weird,
or
yeah.
ask randomly. So do you get any signal from the App Store Connect data, or do you feel like it's just not that reliable?
I usually only use it to like look at, for example, install rates of Facebook versus Instagram, where they have like a neat breakdown. And yeah, but I haven't used it for the demographic data yet. I'm wondering if they have like a significant data set on that, or if that's just from the people that share their data and then it might be skewed.
Yeah.
But yeah, haven't used it for that, but I like the
Okay.
idea, especially for apps like yours, because of course you cannot have an extensive onboarding in every app and ask
Yeah.
users a ton of questions because for a weather app, it's probably a bit weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you start running the campaigns, does Facebook give you a pretty good breakdown of that? So like it's probably better to then do these demographic splits based on the Facebook data and kind of what you're seeing there versus relying on something like the App Store.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook is still great at reporting on a granular level. So it's becoming more and more of a black box in terms of like how targeting is happening, and you usually just run broad and then they do their magic. But in terms of reporting, you can always look into breakdown results on an age, gender level, on every placement. So you can definitely decipher patterns where you see like, hey, whenever we spent more money on 25 to 34 on the Facebook placement, then we saw higher performance in the product. So maybe that's what we need to do more of. So I would definitely encourage everyone to like look at breakdowns, set up reporting so that you see what are my like top 3 placements, where does my money go? Because in the end, Meta is multiple channels. Instagram and Facebook are 2 apps that are gigantic. And then within these, there are different placements that are again used by different users. And like one campaign can this week spend all your budget on Instagram Reels, and next week spend all your budget in a totally different place. And that's gonna do a lot of things to the traffic that you are driving.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. The next thing I wanted to get into was creative testing and how to effectively test creatives. I mean, a bit of a novice myself. Like, I guess what was it, like 26% of the folks here. But I hear from people running big accounts that testing hundreds of creatives and doing rapid iteration and all that kind of stuff. What are the different kind of levels of that, and then how do you think about balancing just the raw creative, hundreds of creatives versus like how do you even hone in on like which creatives you should start testing, especially early? And then it's just a big jumbled mess in my mind. So I think it's good. And I mean, even for people running big accounts, it's like I don't know that they even always know like strategically like which direction to head. So I think this is going to be a great topic for beginners all the way up through more advanced folks. So how do you think about that, kicking off a creative strategy?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I kind of touched a bit on it in the beginning with like setting up different ad sets by creative type. So when I look into like a fresh account or one that has been like only recently scaling, I usually like advise to, in the beginning, test very big swings. Like you want to look into different creative types. You want to look into different creative styles within each type. So, I mean, a 9:16 video can be UGC filmed by a creator. It can be an animation video. They can look very, very different. And that's what you want to explore in the beginning, especially to tap into these different placements and figure out, is there a certain placement audience combination that is already like relevant to me and can work? And if you test all your stuff in statics in the beginning, then that's like even testing different styles just on static or different messages, that you can learn from that. But if they all run on Facebook and the people you're looking for aren't on Facebook, then the results are not going to be as significant for you. So definitely think very, very broad in the beginning. In terms of like how to like produce these and how to tackle production, I usually try to put like a certain percentage of spend on testing, so that I say, I mean, in an early account, we want to be aggressive on testing because maybe we only have like one creative working right now. So let's make sure we're spending 20, maybe even 30% of our budget on test campaigns, where we then iterate through a ton of creatives and really find like what's that one creative type and messaging and style combination that might be working well already. And also I try to always put a percentage of my ad spend on production in the end. That's often a bit forgot about. I think there's usually like big accounts are usually working by the like 10 to 90 or 10, 80 to 20 rule on like testing and business as usual budget. But I feel like often it's a bit forgotten that you need to invest into like new assets, creators producing video content. So I also like to put a percentage on that, so that you actually, as your account scales, also make sure to keep producing new stuff. Because even if it's working well right now, there's going to be times when it's going to be rough. So you want to make sure like you are still feeding new learnings into that process as you scale. And then
Where do you draw the line? So when you set up these test accounts, like what's the signal you're looking for, or what's the threshold you want to see that like, okay, this creative is winning, and until it drops below this, we're going to be putting a lot of budget behind that creative? Like what are the kind of signals that you're looking at?
Yeah. So I usually run this in a weekly or bi-weekly cycle, where then each week or every other week we're getting new creatives, testing them in the account. They would run in a separate campaign so that we're not messing with the performance of what's already working. And then within that, I have my different creative types, maybe even themes by ad set. So I basically have a few hypotheses based on the content where they're going to go in terms of a placement. And if I have two types that are completely different, then I want to give them a fair shot by having them run in separate ad sets, because otherwise Meta is going to like put all the ad spend on like one creative. And if they, for example, they tend to favor UGC content because, again, it's driving a younger audience that is cheaper. So that's why I want to like pull in these splits again. And then depending on how expensive my cost per trial or cost per action in the end, conversion event is, I need a certain budget on that. And like if you're optimizing for a trial and it's as low as $10, then you might just need like $100, $150, $200 in terms of daily budget on these in the US. And to get to a significant volume of conversion events within a week. I would say have it run for at least a week, because you want to have performance on weekdays versus weekends, all times of the day, just to see, like, is this actually working and going to be scalable, or did we just like hit a good day and it's never going to spend more money than that? And I would say...
And then the number of creatives that you're able to kind of insert into the testing phase, that would depend heavily on like how much the spend is, right? So like if you don't have a lot of spend for your creative testing, then you would test fewer creatives, but take bigger swings. And then as you scale your budget, then you can test more creatives, still hopefully taking some big swings. Is that kind of how you think about like volume of creative?
Yeah, pretty much. It's limited by budget. Of course, there's ways to optimize that. For example, a lot of people test in like the Philippines or Indonesia, where like prices are relatively low and there is a good proficiency in English, and then something that wins there has maybe a 70-80% likelihood of also winning in the US, and that could be a first step just to reduce costs of testing. Other than that, in the beginning, yeah, I mean, as you start out, everything is a test, as I said, right? So you don't know what you're doing. You don't have any proven concepts, so you're like testing in all of your campaigns, and it's limited by how much you can spend. And then as you scale, you still want to take big swings, but also get a good ratio of big swings and like iterations, which are basically more proven changes to your ads, because you're going to learn over time and you're going to find out what's the messaging that works, which styles tend to perform. Do we have 2 or 3 creators in our roster that have done all our top performers, so they should be the ones doing the ads? And then it's really easy to like cross-match these learnings. So you have a new concept, you found out, hey, this new messaging is working well, so you're going to apply the style to it that always works. Then you're going to have the creator do it that also always works. And of course, those are lower risk than doing these big swings into totally new things. And so as you scale, like try to weigh these against each other and really more and more shift towards iterations, because you learn what you're doing.
Yeah, fascinating. I hadn't heard the Philippines thing specifically. Would there be any, or have you seen any kind of red flags when that's not going to work? So like if you're going to test in the Philippines, you need to make sure that you have priced it for that market, and like are there specific things you want to set up in those geographies to make sure that you're effectively testing and actually getting the 70 to 80% reliability, versus like maybe if your price is way too high, your product is not attractive to that market, or like what are those other considerations you would take if you are going to test outside the US and then try and apply those learnings to the US?
Yeah, definitely pricing is a big one. So don't like, I mean, for most apps, probably pricing isn't all that optimized in the Philippines because it's not a driver for their revenue. So make sure that the pricing you have in the US is in a similar manner in the Philippines then. So if you're more towards the premium range, then make sure you're converting that into a premium in the Philippines. But of course, that's going to be 80% cheaper than what you're charging in the US and still going to be premium in the Philippines. So get a good understanding of what can we charge in that market so that it applies. And other than that, of course, there are apps and creative types that lend themselves better to this than others. So for example, if you're tapping into certain cultures with your apps and making like in the end, I don't know, or basically things that only a US American would understand, then of course the correlation is going to be lower, but because someone in the Philippines is not going to be relevant to this. So if you're talking about US specific things, or you even have an app that is kind of localized to the US, then of course you will have to be testing in that market to make sense of it. I'm not testing in the Philippines in all of my accounts. I'm doing it in some, and I've seen good results with it. But often I actually start in the US rather, and then as we scale testing spend, that's one way to optimize it, because if you can on each test spend 70% less budget, that means you can test even more and therefore get more creative throughput and find winners.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing, and I've said this a few times before, I don't have data to back this up, but like one consideration that I think is in play here is that when you're testing in other markets, you're hitting kind of the middle and upper middle class of those markets who can afford. And so, like, keep in mind, depending on where you're testing and what you're testing and your app and the relevance to the market and stuff like that, that even though it's a market that generally has like a lower propensity to spend and stuff, if you are if it's mostly folks with the iPhone 15 Pro or a high-end Samsung device or whatever, that the actual demographics may actually, in those specific parts of the market, might actually look more like a US market than you would otherwise expect, given the overall demographics of the different countries that you can test in. So a lot of considerations there.
And also make sure that the market actually is relevant for the OS that you're using. Like, I know there are like certain markets that are like 80% Android, and then if you try testing on iOS there, then there might not be all that much volume that you can do that in the first place. That definitely also plays a role.
But then on the flip side, if the iOS market in that country is way more of that kind of upper middle class or whatever, then it actually is a better testing environment on iOS, in that they'll probably be closer to how the US performs broadly. But again, like, you still need to have enough signals. So if there's like no high-end devices, or the iOS devices are all like 10-year-old used devices, then it looks really different than if you really are kind of reaching a market that's, or a category of folks that's more like the US. All right. So
if you're unsure, like, the easiest way to do this is just run simultaneous tests in the market you're choosing and in the US and see if the results apply. And then if you feel safe about it, then you can move to the cheaper market.
So the last topic, we only have, we can probably go over a little bit on the Q&A, but let's do a speed run of this last topic, and then we'll just jump into Q&A. So last chance to ask your questions, vote up, vote down, and we'll move to questions after. Let's do this. Let's shoot for like 5 minutes on this topic. I know, like, again, maybe we should just save this and do a whole nother webinar. And if you'll find it interesting, let us know, and we can go a lot deeper. But the last topic is scaling with precision, which is from your notes. I really like that framing. You're not just scaling by throwing more money. Ideally, you're scaling with precision. So what did you mean by that? And give us an overview about how you think about scaling with precision.
Yeah, I mean, Peter helped a lot with that framing, so thanks to him. But yeah, in the end, I mean, you are like, oftentimes ad spend is a metric we look at a lot. And then if we're hitting our goals at, I don't know, maybe our goal is 100% or 200% return after like 14, 30 days. And then if we scale our budget and stick within that goal, everyone is happy, but maybe we've reduced return by more than we increased spend, and then that's not a good idea. So definitely, like, don't just throw more money at Meta, but try to be mindful about how you do it. A lot of it comes down, I think, to what we already discussed, in terms that you try to stay in control of where your money is going, and you have a very good view on where that's happening. So really pull your breakdown reports. You can do that either through ads reporting or using tools like Supermetrics that basically plug into the API, and then you can, on a daily basis, look at what's my share of budget going to Facebook versus Instagram and the different placements, so that you definitely see when something is changing quickly. And I've seen cases where accounts flipped their targeting 180 within a day because of a new creative. And of course, that's when you want to get skeptical, because probably your down-funnel metrics are not going to look the same. Maybe they're better, but maybe not. And of course, you want to stay in control of that. Kind of the two main ways I think about scaling are either horizontally or vertically. So you can either add more and more budget to your existing campaigns and ad sets and try to scale them, or you can create new ad sets, and then they have their own budget and are going to start spending. And I would definitely encourage anyone that is scaling to add ad sets as well. You don't need to be constrained by like that mantra of account consolidation, and I only want to have one Advantage Plus campaign and everything goes in there, because what that means is Meta is calling all the shots, and your structure is very risky, because whenever that one campaign and ad set stops working, or they start, flipping your creative mix, then everything breaks. So the more ad sets you pull in as you scale, the more you can stay in control and make sure that your budget goes in the right places. And if one stops working, then you just replace it, basically. So yeah, more ad sets. I'm a big fan of that. And like breaking down your metrics on a placement and audience levels so that you see whenever shifts are happening.
Awesome. Great stuff. So let's dive into the Q&A. Looks like we got a ton of questions.
Let's go.
So I'm going to sort by upvotes. I apologize. I'm not going to call out names because I'm terrible at pronunciation. But first question, what's the best approach for systemic workflow to test new creatives? Should I keep an always on campaign with the best ads and test new? Should it be separate testing campaign? Then how to transfer the winning ads from the test campaign to always on in order to not crush into the learning phase?
Yeah. So I definitely recommend testing a separate campaign and then separate ad sets based on what we talked about. So statics in their own ones, videos in another one, so you can evaluate them based on a placement level performance. Then once you looked at them in terms of performance, so the main KPIs I usually look at are for videos, hook rate, hold rate, so how far do people watch into the video, click rate, and then a cost per result in the end. Once you feel like you found a winner, you can either then duplicate that into your business as usual campaign, where it would then scale alongside your always on winning ads. But I would definitely do that in a strategic manner. So if you found something where you feel like, okay, this is 5-10% better than what my current winning ads are doing, maybe rather keep it in the backlog to not interfere with that algorithmic learning. Because if you're doing well at the moment, you're hitting your goals, a 5% uplift is probably not going to change the game for you. And there is going to be a point when what's working right now in your scaling ad set won't work anymore. And then that's the time when you can pull in that kind of mid-sized winner. If you find something that is kind of totally blowing you away and it's 50% cheaper than everything else and you feel like you cracked the code, then of course, like, start scaling it, put it in the business as usual one, or even think about scaling that testing ad set where it's running. If it's a totally new creative type, sometimes I would do that if I'm testing like a new format which is not live yet in any of the business as usual ones, then I would just start scaling that creative testing one because I want to keep it separate anyways, because it's targeting a different placement and audience.
Awesome. All right, let's go to the next question. For indie developers on a shoestring budget, love the question. I'm right there with you. Is there anything useful we can do with meta ads for less than a month, or should we just stick with Apple search ads?
For less than 1K a month, I think it's going to be very tough. I mean, one thing I wrote about also on the Revenue Cat blog is maybe using web to app, which is, I think, a bit, I mean, it takes some work in the beginning because you need to set up a web funnel, and that's just in the end comes on top of having an app. I think kind of due to better conversion signal, these campaigns can be a bit easier to handle and need less ad spend to like get to a point where they've learned whom to target. But below 1K, I think you're going to have a really, really hard time on Meta. And I think the investment is not going to be the best. So as long as you're not able to spend more, I would say Apple Search Ads is the more interesting place to be for you. Other interesting channels can be, for example, influencers that can work on a low budget. So if you find someone creating content in your niche that has like a very good relevance for the audience that you're buying, then try to cooperate with these people and have them post content about your app. And that can work on a low budget as well. But these platforms that optimize for signals, you just need more input for them.
Yeah, great answer. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Like it's I mean, and this is kind of gets back to just the changes in the industry that with algorithmic targeting, it just doesn't work as well if you can't train the algorithm And back 10 years ago, you just ramp up based on interests and other things, and yeah, just so much less effective these days.
Yeah, it's just like if you restrict your targeting too much to these like specific audiences, it gets really expensive, and then again, it just won't work.
Yeah. Next question. Curious what methods you use for attribution, AppsFlyer adjust, regular Facebook attribution, etc. Also curious how accurate the attribution is. Approximately what percentage of purchases are attributed correctly after iOS 14.5?
Yeah. I usually recommend to start only on the Meta SDK. If you're still small, starting out, I think in the end, it kind of makes sure there is no middleman, which introduce also risks in the end. If you're sending signals through 6 different platforms before they actually arrive at Meta, then there's breaking points where you can lose signal, and that's just going to make it harder. So I often would just run Meta with their own SDK, which is free and you can easily implement in your app. In terms of how many percentage of purchases get attributed, so it depends on your attribution framework. The default now is AEM, which is Meta's aggregated event measurements. So basically they're fingerprinting, mainly based on IPs. With that, I actually see pretty good match rates, like 80% plus. Some accounts I'm getting close to like a 100% match rate. But it also depends on how many traffic sources you have. So as your kind of media mix grows and you're sending more traffic to the app, they might kind of go wrong in their modeling a bit. But otherwise, I think it's a pretty good solution. Scan tends to undertrack quite a bit more for me. So I often see like 40, 50% less conversions in the account than are actually happening. Of course, that's a bit easier to figure out if you're small and you have Meta as one channel, you switch on campaigns, you see I'm getting 50 trials a day and Meta reports 25. Okay, then I know what's happening. If you're big and you have a lot of organic, that's a lot harder to figure out. And that's when you need to do incrementality testing or try this in markets where you're not as active so that you can figure out like, what can I expect from my tracking?
Yeah, great answer. I'm going to go off script a little bit and ask my own question. How is Scan working these days? And is it? And then what do you think Apple can do to improve it? And maybe go quick, since this is my question and we have a lot more questions to get to. But I mean, it is something that's talked about a lot in the industry. Like, Scan just doesn't seem to be living up to what it could be. So, I mean, do you have it turned on for all account, or like, can you turn it on and off, or like, what's the state of Scan today?
Yeah, you can turn it on and off. So you can have your scan schema set and then have one campaign optimizing for scan events and another campaign optimizing for aggregated event measurement. And I've been advocating for doing that a bit because I feel like you don't want to forget about scan and how to do this. And you want to have like your analytics in place that hey, for this campaign, I'm missing 40% of my events, and then I can model that out of how performant it is. But I'm definitely seeing the tendency there's like most accounts are running on AEM because it's just more convenient. There is no post-back delay. You don't have to worry about privacy thresholds, which are really a killer if you're small, because oftentimes you're getting even less events because you're not hitting the 88 installs a day. So definitely on Meta, I would guess that most advertisers these days are on AEM if they can. I know there are some like restricted areas where you have to use scan. But like Apple really will have to improve on that if they want people on that framework. I think like with Scan 4, there were a few like enhancements that they did introduce, but then Meta still didn't roll that out. So I feel like if they're not going to make it substantially better, then ad platforms don't even have an incentive to implement them. So as Meta sees better performance on AEM, they're not going to move to Scan, which puts us in a similar position again than we were before with the IDFA. Now everything is IP powered, and we're waiting for the day that Apple is taking the IP away, which feels a bit weird, but that's just how performance looks like at the moment, and Scan is a bit dead, unfortunately.
Yeah. Apple. All right, back to the regularly scheduled program. MMP needed? Isn't MMP needed or recommended if you want to advertise on Meta and TikTok? Ad spend about 5 to 10K a month. What are the key advantages? I guess key advantages of running with an MMP versus not.
Yeah. For Meta, you don't need an MMP. You can also spend 500K a month and you can still run on the Meta SDK. And on TikTok, I think to this date, you still will need an MMP because they don't have their own SDK yet. I think it's in alpha or something, so it's coming. But like if you want to spend on TikTok these days, I think you still need one. I would say at your ad spend, you don't want to spend on 2 channels and you don't want an MMP. I would say like rather do Meta, choose the SDK and learn what you're doing in terms of a like creative style messaging, because in the end, what you can do on Instagram Reels is quite similar to what you can do on TikTok. So you can tap into a similar audience with similar creatives. So if you figure this out on Meta and you're hitting a ceiling at some point, you can still move to TikTok. And at this ad spend, I mean, we said before we want to be at 10K to properly test the channel. So don't split it between 2 channels.
Yeah. Unfortunate, but true. Next question. If I'm starting with many testing ad groups and don't yet have a scaling evergreen campaign, what's your best practice to scale the winners? Should they go together in a new campaign from scratch with an initial higher budget?
So, I mean, yeah. So if everything is a test in the beginning, then like the one that turns out to be the winner, you can convert that basically into your evergreen campaign. So you don't need to then duplicate your winners and put them somewhere else, but rather keep that campaign live. In terms of combining the like different creatives, so let's say you have 5 ad sets, you tested 3 ads in each of these. Now you have 2 where you feel like I want to keep those running because they seem to be working well. Then the question to me would again be, should these be combined because they're running towards a similar audience on similar placements? So definitely check the results down to that. If all of this comes from like Instagram Reels and is coming from 25 to 34-year-old males, then they can be combined within the same ad set. But be aware that if you add additional ads to an ad set, you're going to relaunch that learning phase. So that also needs to be a consideration. Like if results look strong and you don't want to interfere with that, then rather scale both ad sets until you feel like one of them is not working as well anymore and you need changes anyways, and then take those moments when you're making updates anyways to, for example, also consolidate creatives. So usually like how I change things in my account, like targeting, for example, I want to exclude people, I don't know, currently it's running on 18 to 65 plus. I want to trim that down to 25 to 65 plus because I've seen the young age group not converting. Then I try to bundle my changes with other stuff. If things are still working well, I'm not going to make that change because it's going to basically restart the campaign and then it might not work. So I'm going to collect other things while this is still running, maybe find new creative winners. Maybe I have other changes I want to do to the campaign. And then I choose one date where I say, now I'm going to apply all of this to minimize how often I interfere with the learning phase.
Great. Next question. Do you encourage using Advantage Plus campaigns?
My favorite ones. I'm also going to be at App Promotion Summit in San Francisco with a talk called Disadvantage Plus, 10 hot fixes for Meta's broken algorithm.
That's a great title.
I don't say like don't run Advantage Plus, but for me it's an add-on for scaling. So in the end, this horizontal scaling to me means also running different campaign types because they're going to go after different people. An Advantage Plus campaign is functioning differently than an app event optimized campaign, a normal one. So to me, it's just kind of an additional layer I'm going to put on top. But I usually encourage to start on manual ones because they allowed for more more ad sets and deeper granularity. And for example, having the creative type split is easier if I do one campaign with a kind of UGC ad set, an animation ad set, and maybe a static ad set. With Advantage Plus, I would have to create 3 campaigns for that. And many people are like not so happy to do that because, again, it's account consolidation. It's against account consolidation in the end. So I would encourage not to build an account entirely on Advantage Plus and throw everything in there, as Meta tends to recommend. These campaign types work with a lot of assets, so you can have 50 creatives in there and like have one Advantage Plus campaign at $10,000 a day and have everything in that. But again, Meta often functions on this like winner takes all principle, and then they spend all your budget on like 1 or 2 creatives, and if that stops working, then the whole account stops working. So that's why I usually build my structure on manual campaigns, maybe 70% of spend, and then I have an add-on which is Advantage Plus for scaling.
Excellent. I forgot to ask Marcus. I can stay on a few more minutes. Do you need to? We kind of hit the top of the hour. Do you need to bounce, or do you want to answer a couple more questions?
Let's do a few more. All good.
Okay. Yeah. So some of these were kind of answered already, so I'm going to kind of skip down. I thought this one was a really good one. At what stage during testing or scaling do you add lookalikes or add restrictions on audience?
So when it comes to restrictions on audience, I usually do that early on already because, oftentimes it works pretty similarly across all accounts. 18 to 24, that age group is very, very hard to monetize if you're not an app that is specifically made for that audience. Like, I don't know, if you're trying to build a social network, of course, you need more users and you need cheap traffic to get that network effect going. So then keep them included. But if you're a subscription app, optimizing for a trial start, and you're charging $60 a year, then it's going to be tough to convert these people because just purchase power isn't there. So I will make a few assumptions there early on and restrict to rather like start the account on high return, because like I'm happy to spend, like the client is going to be happy if I spend 50K on a profitable return, and it's not about scale yet. So I rather start more restricted, and then as we scale, I might open up into younger audiences to see, okay, can we make that equation work somehow? Where's the tipping point? Can we still buy users 20 plus? Can we buy users 22 plus? Or does it really need to be 28 or 30 plus? So I'll play around with that a bit. When it comes to lookalikes, I use them as soon as they become available, basically, which means you need enough valuable data to feed into that custom audience that is then used to generate the lookalike. Meta usually recommended, that was pre-AGT, like 2K in like odd people that they need to match to what you've uploaded. But match rates have been very, very low ever since IDFAs are gone, because that has been the predominant match type to find people on mobile. So the main identifier now is email addresses. And of course, like you're not necessarily using the same email address in your product this day than in your Facebook account that you set up I don't know when. So
Yeah,
that's
especially
why,
if you're using like sign in with Apple and it's the
then you
iCloud
don't even
email.
have
and something
one.
like that.
So
Yeah.
usually what I look for is 10,000 entries of whatever I'm selecting, and I'm trying to use a valuable selection, which is usually payers at least. And then over time, I go even more granular, and I go for people that have bought a 12-month subscription, or even people that are renewed, which of course is an even higher quality signal. But in the end, you don't want to build lookalikes just for some mid-value event, because it's going to be hard for you to evaluate them, because you don't have down funnel conversion in Meta. You're only going to see how costly was the cost per trial, maybe a qualified trial if you're using that strategy that we talked about before. But then you need to figure out in your blended data, am I currently buying a more qualitative audience or not? And oftentimes the upper funnel is actually more expensive because you are limiting reach massively. An audience like reach for a lookalike might be like 4 million in the US if you go for like a 2% lookalike. And then that is going to be more expensive, but oftentimes the down funnel conversion is going to be a lot higher and making for a good return. But you need to figure it out. Hence, you're looking for really a big bump. If things are more or less the same as your blended data, then it's going to be really hard to figure out if you made a dent.
All right, let's do two more.
Let's do it.
There's a lot of good questions in here. Like I said, we need to do like a 6 hour. I guess it just needs to be a series. What's the average life cycle for a UGC ad? And actually, I would expand this to say not just UGC, but what's the average for UGC, and then what's the average for ads generally? Weeks, months? How do you know if a UGC ad is a winner? I had some perform amazingly well for 2 to 3 weeks, and then performance deteriorated on a cost per result basis.
I would say it can be pretty long on Meta. So I have accounts where we still run profitably on ads that have been around for months for sure. In the end, it depends on like where did performance start and what's your goal. So if you kind of want to achieve a certain return on ad spend, and as you launch that new ad, it has been performing 2 times better than that, then of course you can run this a lot longer while still hitting the goal before it's going to go below goal. Another metric that is interesting here is, of course, how much money you're trying to put behind it. So the more money you spend on it, the faster you're going to see fatigue on that creative, because you're like basically Meta will go from like ideal customers into not as ideal customers, and like go into like more and more broader audiences over time. And with that, you're definitely going to see that performance goes lower and lower. So that's where then you need to figure out like how far can I take this. But I would say generally, if you found a really like a win-win, then that's going to work like rather months than just weeks. If this is happening, I would say definitely again check like where is Meta spending your money? Has something changed there? Like might they be taking this to another placement now? And then that might be a hint that in the beginning they found a better audience on another placement, but some signal told them to not do that anymore. Oftentimes this is even just engagement signals. So I'm seeing my targeting change based on comments people are leaving, but then I have people commenting that are saying this sucks or I don't believe this works, which of course isn't a nice signal for targeting, but Meta does use it for that. So really dig deep into where has that creative been running, have people engaged with it to figure out if something has changed, and that could be then a valuable learning for you to know we need to go back to where we came from.
All right, last question. How are campaigns for how should campaigns for subscriptions be optimized with ROAS bidding in Meta? The first payment usually comes with a negative user economics. Then with LTV, it goes positive. What purchase revenue should be sent to Meta in this context? Or are you sending purchase data to Meta, or are you focusing more on events?
Yeah. I'm not using value bidding in any of my accounts at the moment, or ROAS bidding. So you can either kind of just tell them maximize value, or you can say I want to see a certain ROAS, which is basically a bid cap on your value-based bidding. If you're doing it, then I would say you definitely want to consider LTV, or like expected value from these cohorts, and not just what's happening in terms of first revenue, because a monthly user definitely will grow into higher LTV over time, while a yearly user will stay flat for a year. So that means you need to tell Meta what you're expecting to happen. And this is also a good place where you can then feed in your learnings from different cohorts. If you know that older users are going to basically grow in revenue much more than younger users, and you've asked in onboarding how old they are, then make sure that you basically layer on these predictions to feed back really smart value to them. So it's not about really sending back your revenue, but really sending back just a value that then correlates with higher value for you that you can make up. Yeah, that's usually what I would try to do here, but I haven't done it in a while. Last time we tried this was at Blinkist when I worked there in like 2020. And back then we haven't seen great results because also the algorithm in the end was more expensive. So it's definitely like a premium bidding type. But I think if you see like really large discrepancies in like how audiences perform in the long run, then definitely that can be interesting. But you need to like basically hack it a bit, because the algorithm was made for gaming, and in the end where you have IAPs from like $1 to $500, and then the algorithm can really learn who is going to be a like VIP user and who's just here to like try the game. So you need to figure out how you can feedback these more diverse values based on what you learn in onboarding.
Awesome. VIP user. That's a nice way to say whale, right?
That's the nice way to say whale, yeah. When I still worked in the gaming industry, we had this internal note saying, please don't call them whales anymore.
I think that's good. All right, Marcus, thank you so much. There were a ton of questions in here, and I'll go through the questions afterward and use that to help inform kind of future content. So sorry if I didn't get to your question, but
I can also use them to inform future content.
yeah, absolutely. But thank you all for sticking around. Those of you who did, those of you who are watching this after the fact, the rest will be less relevant. But again, Revenue Cats App Growth Annual is happening next week. And actually, like Marcus said, the day after is App Promotion Summit San Francisco. So if you can't make it for App Growth Annual, most of us from App Growth Annual will be at App Promotion Summit the next day. So great place to go learn from and meet Marcus if you aren't going to be at App Growth Annual. And then again, check out the podcast. I think Peter may have already linked it in the chat, the previous podcast episode that we had with Marcus. Again, a good kind of overview. We didn't go nearly as deep as we did today, but I think the two kind of complement each other well. So go check that out. And then lastly, anything you want to share? I mean, we were just talking before, it seems like you're pretty busy, but if people did want to work with you or try and work with you or get on your waiting list, what does that look like these days?
I mean, I don't have an official waiting list. Maybe I should have one. Oftentimes it's a bit about timing, and when I feel like I can take on a client and someone reaches out that is interesting, then I just make it happen. But yeah, right now I'm rather looking to reduce hours towards the end of the year because I need some more family time. So really before Q2 2025, I don't have any open slots. But yeah, make sure to follow me on LinkedIn. I share everything I learn and everything I have learned on that platform, and I answer questions and comments. So like we can make this the same format happen as we've did here. And otherwise, yeah, maybe I'm seeing a few of you in San Francisco at the App Growth Annual or App Promotion Summit. And yeah, really looking forward to that. Leaving on Sunday.
Awesome. Me too. Or I'm leaving on Monday, but really looking forward to meeting you in person and hanging out with the, it's gonna be a lot of cool folks in town for both these events. So it'll be a fun, it's fun to get out of this little Zoom box and actually see some of the industry faces. But yeah, thanks again, Marcus. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you all for sticking around and asking so many good questions that I had a hard time getting through. We had a hard time getting through them all. And we'll definitely have Marcus on again soon. So thank you.
See you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.